During the summer of 2003, events in the northeastern United States involving a strange human-like creature sparked brief local media interest before an apparent blackout was enacted. Little or no information was left intact, as most online and written accounts of the creature were mysteriously destroyed. Primary focused in rural New York State and once found in Idaho, self-proclaimed witness told stories of their encounters with the creature of unknown origin. Emotions range from extremely traumatic levels of fright and discomfort to almost childlike sense of playfulness and curiosity. While their published versions are no longer on record, the memories remain powerful. Several of involved parties began looking for answers that year. In early 2006, the collaboration had accumulated nearly 2 dozen documents dating between the 12th century and present day, spanning 4 continents. In almost all cases, the stories were identical. I've been in contact with a member of this group and was able to get some excerpts from the upcoming book, a suicide note from 1964. As I prepared to take my life, I felt it necessary to assume any guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke I saw him in his form. Once again I awoke and heard his voice, and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear for what I might wake next. I cannot ever awake. Goodbye. Found in the same wooden box were 2 empty envelopes addressed to William and Rose, and 1 loose personal letter with no envelope. Dearest Linny, I prayed for you, and he spoke your name. Now this is a journal entry translated from Spanish that is dated to 1880. I have experienced the greatest terror. I've experienced the greatest terror. I've experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand. I will not sleep. His voice. Unintelligible text. A marriage log from 1691. He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again. At the request of the Rake. From a witness, 2006. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very excited after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. About 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gone up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back at the sheets, only to wake him up in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he grasped and pulled his feet from the end of the bed so quickly. His knees almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for half a second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man, or a large, hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I wasn't instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband peering over his arms and knees tucked in a fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed and then crawled quickly into a flailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5. It just seemed like a while, just looking at my husband. The creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway, leading to the kids' room. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around, looked directly at me, and covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter Clara. The creature ran down the stairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short little life. She said, "He is the Rake." My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing our daughter to the hospital. They didn't survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police was helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, local television never picked it up, and the police didn't find anything in the investigation. For several months, my son Jason and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of two other people in New York who had seen the creature we now refer to as the Rake. It took the four of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the Rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages and never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the Rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was more of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the Rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the second week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleeping while blurring through the recording at 8 times normal speed. This still took almost an hour every day. On the first day of the third week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the Rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at that time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head made me very upset. I haven't seen the Rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know in fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me. End of witness report. And just like that, another classic creepypasta story ends. And with that being said, let's talk about it. So first off, the Rake is definitely one of my favorite monsters out of the whole creepypasta mythos. I find him more scary than Slenderman, as the idea of a hairless or whatever creature, humanoid creature I should say, watching you in not only in your own home, but in your most vulnerable state, sleeping, and you wouldn't even notice it. And when you do, that's probably the last thing you ever see. Now, of course, there's many stories of the Rake throughout the internet, but I chose this one as this is probably the most well-known and the most classic one, as the story does a pretty good job at sort of explaining really what the creature is and how it's not so much a one-time thing, but a phenomenon that a lot of people have encountered, which I think is actually a good, way to tackle the Rake, in my opinion. The story definitely plays into the whole legends that you'd hear about, like Mothman, the Bigfoot, stuff like that, where there's different accounts from different points in time, from different parts of the world, claiming to see the Rake. And I find that, I like how this story, does that in sort of a way. And it definitely adds, more atmosphere and realism, how each account is different from the other, not really one the same. Creatures the same, just not the experience. Now, I guess my only issue would be with the story is the fact that there really isn't too many. It goes over, I think over 3 or 4 of the accounts. I wish, it definitely went over, maybe another 2 more or 3, I think, just to sort of get an understanding, because towards the end it does seem like they kind of try to rush it with that one lady with her story. I did notice how they just named a bunch of random stuff, I guess accounts from history, so I would definitely appreciate it if they made a little bit more. But anyways, that's gonna be it for today's video, you guys. Those are my thoughts on the Rake. Let me know what you thought of the story. Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Let me know why in the comment section. And while you're there, don't forget to check out my social medias, and link will be in description to the original story as well. And just like the video if you dislike it, like the video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to share and subscribe, like I said. And with that being said, I am out.